As you know, this is Chat and Chew, and we're all about a low-fat, low-salt, low-sugar diet that's plant-strong. We meet together as we help each other meet our own personal goals. We are a health study group with that strong connection to diet and health. And we're a bunch of volunteers, basically, with collaborations with city groups and businesses that help us meet our goals. One of our mentors, Dr. John McDougall, reminds us diet is powerful medicine, and that when we change our diet, we want to be sure to check with our health provider, especially if we're on medication, pregnant, or seriously ill. And we also want to be sure and take a B12 supplement as we put more and more plants on our plate. Chat and Chew meetings are being live streamed to YouTube, and we're recording them. And so your attendance gives your consent to possibly having your image used. So what's on our Zoom plant-based plate for today? We're almost finished with this welcome. And then we're going to do the Zoom discussion of our next meeting. And that's going to be fun. And then we'll have an introduction or two of Dr. Puska, our special guest today. Dr. Puska is going to speak at 12, and probably around 12:30 he'll finish his talk, and we'll have questions and answers for him. Now you might, during his talk, think of some questions you'd like to ask. So open up your chat box when I finish this presentation, and you can put your questions there so the tech volunteers can help ask them and to facilitate as many as possible. We'll have our questions and answers for him, and then we'll finish up our meeting about 1 o'clock. So for our next meeting, we're going to go over this quick. This is going to be on Zoom, but we're going to Zoom to Bach Tower with a collaborative effort with PhytoFit, Debbie Zimmerman's business, where she's a Food for Life instructor, and also Chat and Chew. We'll be meeting on the 12th of December on a Saturday from 10 to 12:30. And the reason it's such a long time is because we've got quite a few things happening. We've got a review of what the long-lived populations are like and what kinds of foods they eat. We'll have a registered dietitian from University of Florida and IFAS. We'll be talking about why those foods are good. And then also we'll have Debbie Zimmerman doing a cook-along with some of the foods that we actually find in the Blue Zones that Dan Buettner wrote about from his book, The Blue Zones Kitchen. So that's going to be fun too. And finally, Tricia Martin, who is over all wonderful events at Bach Tower, she's going to take us in the garden, the kitchen garden at Bach, and show us what's there. And we're welcome to come and harvest some of those things ourselves from the garden. This does have a fee if you're not a member of Bach Tower. This is their class, but it's free to members who do have membership there. And we recommend you consider getting those because it's just fantastic to be able to go out in the outside in social distance. Okay, so now we're going to go to our introduction, and I'm going to stop sharing screen because we're going to put Nat West in the spotlight because he's going to introduce Dr. Puska for us. And Nat, as we know, has been somebody who's taught us a lot about the Blue Zones, and we're really happy he's here today to help us with that. So Nat, tell us about Dr. Puska and what you found that would be helpful to us here in Chat and Chew.
In 1971, leaders in Finland decided it was time to act when research revealed that the population of North Karelia, an area in eastern Finland about the size of New Jersey, had the highest rate of fatal heart disease in the world. The Finnish Minister of Health selected Dr. Pekka Puska to lead this effort. Dr. Puska is a physician and also has a master's degree in social sciences. He was only 27 at the time when he started the project, which was initially thought for 5 years. Within the first 5 years, the heart attack death rate among middle-aged men was reduced by 25%. In 5 years, average cholesterol dropped 6% and blood pressure for men dropped 4% and women 7%. lung cancer rates in the same group decreased by 10% due to smoking cessation efforts. Dr. Puska served as the director and principal investigator of the North Karelia Project for 25 years, and ultimately the annual heart disease mortality rate for the working age population plummeted 80%. All of Finland ultimately became involved, and in the last 3 decades, life expectancy in Finland for men has increased by 10 years. There have been many other dramatic general improvements in public health as a result of his leadership. In Dan Buettner's book, The Blue Zone Solutions, in a chapter appropriately entitled Finland's Miracle Makeover, Buettner writes, "To date, it has never been replicated." As a result of his efforts, obviously many people seek him out, and he continues to make a positive difference. Dr. Puska was Director General of Finland's National Institute of Health and Welfare in Finland from 2009 to 2013, a comprehensive national institute for public health and welfare under the Ministry of Health in Finland. Professor Puska also was president of the World Health Foundation. In 2017 to 2019, he served as a member of the National Parliament of Finland, serving on the Health and Social Affairs Committee and the Education Committee of the Parliament. He was president of the International Association of National Public Health Institutes and chair of the Governing Council of the World Health Organization, International Agency for Cancer Research. Dr. Puska has also served as a director of non-communicable disease prevention and health promotion at the World Health Organization headquarters in Geneva. Under his leadership, this effort culminated in the adoption of the Global Strategy on Diet, Physical Activity, and Health by the World Health Assembly in 2004. He served on many other organizations and has over 500 scientific publications. Needless to say, we are honored to have him with us today.
And that we are, Nat. In fact, there happens to be somebody else who wishes he was here that is honored to have him as his friend. So I'm going to just show a real quick video. It only lasts about a minute. And I think Dr. Puska, who will be in spotlight now, might just recognize him.
Hi, it's Dan Buettner from the Blue Zones. I'm in a blue zone of a different sort today here down in the Caribbean. Otherwise, I would love to be there with you to honor and to introduce Pekka Puska, my dear friend, someone to whom I'm deeply indebted. He was very much the inspiration for our Blue Zones projects. I think he's arguably the greatest scientist ever, practitioner ever when it comes to non-infectious disease, public health. He's inspired so many people from so many countries to change the environment, to make the healthy choice the easy choice, which I think is the right way to tackle heart disease and diabetes and so many kinds of cancers. He's really a pioneer, a hero of mine, and someone, in my opinion, should get the Nobel Prize. Have a good one.
Well, that was a switch, wasn't it? You had somebody to surprise you when you surprised us. Nobel Prize. Wow. Dr. Puska, why don't you tell us why is it and what have you done that impresses Dan Buettner so much, as well as all the others that you are mentor for?
Yes, thank you for the introduction. This was a nice surprise, and good morning to everybody there. It's morning there, but it's already very dark fall evening here in Finland. The background of this talk goes to last year's Lifestyle Medicine Conference in Orlando, where I had the honor to receive the first Ansel Keys Award. And I have been asked here to talk about the North Karelia project here in Finland, its history and experiences. Of course, it starts to be fairly historical, but the question is really how we succeeded to bring down the highest heart disease mortality in the world very dramatically, mainly with lifestyle changes in the population. And the background really is that after World War II, the previously very high infectious disease mortality, especially tuberculosis, had been well brought under control. But people start to see around them a lot of heart disease and some other chronic diseases. At first, people thought that, of course, you have to die of something. But then there started to be more and more news about international mortality comparisons, which show that Finland had the highest heart disease mortality in the world, particularly Finnish men. And the worst situation was, as I think the introduction already said, in the eastern province of North Karelia. And this was confirmed by the so-called 7-country study led by Ansel Keys. This situation, the very high mortality of young people, particularly men, and then the statistics that confirm this, of course, led to big concern by the people in the area. And the powerful governor of North Karelia convened the local members of parliament and other community leaders, and they made a petition to national authorities in Helsinki. This is a terrible problem. Do something to help us to reduce this mortality. We cannot cope with the problem anymore. And this led to planning where also World Health Organization and international experts like Henry Blackburn from USA participated. And this planning led to the launch of the North Karelia project in 1972. In the introduction, it was mentioned that I was fairly young to be appointed as director. The old boys, in particular Professor Martti Karvonen, who worked very closely with Ansel Keys, later on before his death, he said to me that it was one of his best decisions to appoint me as director, not because I was good, but because I was young. He was clever to see that this has to be a long-term effort to control chronic diseases. After this, I started to move around North Karelia. And let me also say that North Karelia is geographically a fairly large area, semi-rural, lakes and forests. It's a beautiful area. When we had started the work and there was international attention, we had a number of big international TV companies there. I remember, for instance, Dan Rather from CBS came over, Peter Jennings from ABC, and I think it was Peter Jennings. He interviewed me by a lake, beautiful place. And I remember him say that I am in North Karelia, very close to the Russian border. This is a beautiful area. This is a paradise. And you would think that everybody here is healthy, but no, this area has the highest mortality of heart disease in the world. So it was a fairly dramatic start. I have many memories. I remember when I went to elementary schools, I asked young pupils whose father has died, and so many hands were raised. I remember a friend of mine owned a gas station, and he had negotiated a loan with the bank to expand his business. But he said, I'm already 35. I don't know when I get my myocardial infarction. So he tore the papers. And also at the baseline survey in 72, when in the questionnaire we asked the question, symptoms of coronary heart disease, do you have chest pain at effort? And young people, very often young men particularly, they answered, not yet. They thought when I get 40, I get my chest pain. And of course, my good friend Hans Diehl reminded me of the story in Reader's Digest that said that there are so many beautiful widows in North Karelia because their husbands have died. So in the beginning, before we started the work, we did a large baseline survey, and I come back to that. And after the survey, the project intervention was started. And the question was, of course, how can we bring down the mortality? And we had two main principles. One was prevention, emphasis on prevention. And the second principle, community-based strategy or population-based strategy for prevention. And as to prevention, we realized, of course, that the good hospitals that we already had may save the life of the patient. But with chronic diseases, treatment, unfortunately, is often a bit late. And the real potential for public health is in prevention. At that time, we knew much less about what causes heart disease, but already the classical work by Ansel Keys and a number of others had indicated that there are some very strong risk factors that are really very likely causal. At that time, there were three particular factors that we often call now classical risk factors: high blood cholesterol and high blood pressure. Dr. Ansel Keys had shown in his classical studies that blood cholesterol is so strongly determined by what we eat, and particularly on the quality of fat. And of course, the third risk factor was smoking. And this also matched with our local situation in North Karelia and Finland as a general. The diet was really wrong from this point of view, very one-sided, extremely much animal fat, very little vegetable oil, very little fruit and vegetables. And because of this, the general blood cholesterol levels were record high, blood pressure levels were high, because also the salt intake was high. And majority of men smoked. So this was very strong background for prevention. Of course, we said we don't know everything, but there's a very firm basis to start prevention, attacking these factors. And the second was the strategy, because it was not question only of some people, like patients, that had these risk factors. It was the general population where the diet was wrong and there was so much smoking. So we realized that in order to reduce heart disease in North Karelia, we have to change the lifestyles, not only of patients, but among the whole population. And because the risk factor levels were really high because of the general lifestyle. And thus the target of the intervention became not only some individuals, but the community. The community of North Karelia also as a social and even physical environment to change the community as a whole, so that the kind of lifestyles of people would change along. I do not have time to describe what all we did in North Karelia. We did so much. Of course, there was much information about lifestyle and benefits and how to change lifestyles through so many channels: leaflets, local newspaper, radio. Health services were much involved, particularly local health centers, doctors, and our good public health nurses who move very much around people. They were very much involved. Schools were involved. We worked also with children, so they brought the messages to homes. I remember among many other things, we had a sticker: "Don't smoke here. We are in the North Karelia project." And when the children brought these stickers to homes, so many homes became smoke-free. We worked with numerous organizations, not only health organizations, but many others. And I can mention a particularly important one, that is the very strong housewives organization, so-called Marta organization, which had a local club practically in every village and every part of the town. And it was this organization which was very influential concerning cooking habits, diets. So, and the wives, of course, were worried about the health of their husbands. So through this organization, we could much change the diets at home. Later on, we started also to work with groceries, or pretty soon to work with groceries and food industry. I remember the local sausage factory, the manager got a myocardial infarction, so we talked to him to change his production to much less fat. We worked with local bakeries for less salt and so on. Later on, we became much more on national level. We had some very major TV programs, stop smoking programs, diet programs on national TV over a 10-year time. And of course, we contributed to health legislation. Already end of 70s, we had our first tobacco law, very strong. So after end of 70s, in more than 40 years, there's been no tobacco advertising in Finland anymore. So I could describe a lot this, but the main principle I hope you get is what some people call community organization. Working close with the people, we often use the word boots deep in the mud. It's really among the people. And for about 25 years, I really went very much around the area among the people. And so comparing with many international projects that have beautiful strategies and maybe even some good health communication, I think our success was much due to the fact that we really were with people, try to change the communities. Of course, I should say that this all was not easy. When I go around, I've been going around international meetings, I hear very often people say that, yes, it was so easy in North Karelia. In our country, it's very difficult to change lifestyles. And I always respond that it wasn't easy in North Karelia. It was a very poor, deprived area. It was a dairy farming area where the fat production was part of the livelihood. At that time, we investigators were pretty young, and the influential cardiologists in Helsinki, they were suspicious about our work. They at that time said, we don't really know what causes heart disease. It's not, we don't have good basis for prevention at that time. And the dairy industry started pretty soon to lobby very much against us. And not even with ordinary people, you know how difficult it is to persuade people to stop smoking, to change diet. So it wasn't easy, but with this work over time, we started to see substantial changes. And coming to the results, we started not only intervention, but very careful evaluative research, because we thought that it is important to have this experience very good analyzed and documented for Finland, and as it turned out later on for all globally. We have published our results in hundreds of medical papers. We have a summary book that maybe some have even seen about the North Karelia project. I think this latest version is about 10 years ago. Also, even much later, the Journal of World Heart Federation, Global Heart, published a special issue of North Karelia project. So, the results have been very well documented. As the introduction told, the original project was only in North Karelia in the beginning for the first 5 years, but during the first 5 years already we saw substantial changes. But it was quite clear that with this kind of chronic disease epidemic, we need much more time. But at the same time, the national authorities say that your results are promising. We need to move also on national scale. But we did continue in North Karelia for about 25 years. When I later on became Director General of the National Public Health Institute in Finland, as introduction told, that greatly helped, of course, with the national extension of the work. And then to the results, actually, to assess the results, we implemented very large and well-standardized population surveys for risk factors and lifestyles to assess their changes, to assess changes in the target risk factors and lifestyles. And we also established disease registers to assess the changes in disease rates. And I think I already mentioned that during the first 5 years, we saw substantial changes in diet and smoking and related biological risk factors, cholesterol, blood pressure, and some others, and also already in cardiovascular mortality. It is really interesting how quickly you can see some changes if you change your diet, if you stop smoking. You don't have to wait for years. These continued then when the project was continued, so that over years we saw really very dramatic changes in diet. People switch from butter and animal fats to vegetable oils. Fruit and vegetable intake has greatly increased. We also started the project to promote local berry production and berry products because we don't have so much fruits in the northern climate, but we have beautiful berries both in the forest and the gardens. And also salt intake reduced much. And smoking, that was very common among men in the beginning, went down at that time to close to 20%, and it's now approaching 10% of men smoking daily anymore. And following that, blood cholesterol levels reduced, blood pressure levels reduced, and I'm not speaking of patients or group of people, but the population. So over this, let's say 30 years, the general blood cholesterol level of Finnish people reduced by about 20%. That's a dramatic change. Not with drugs. Of course, we do have nowadays, in the last few years, more and more even cholesterol reducing drugs, but the whole thing was mainly with dietary changes. And as to cardiovascular mortality, as the introduction already said, in 30 years, the number of heart disease deaths among working age people, the annual number of deaths reduced by more than 80%. And also dramatic reduction in tobacco-related cancers. And as the introduction said, this all led to nowadays a little bit more than 10 years, extra years in life expectancy. And what is also very important, that those extra years were mainly healthy years. So it's not only question of preventing mortality, it's really a question of extending healthy years, and of course extending health in years. Our studies have also shown that the majority, let's say over 2/3 of the reduction in heart disease mortality could be easily explained by the changes in the target risk factors. And the reduction in cholesterol, which means the dietary changes, were of overwhelming importance. Of course, smoking reduction contributed to that, and blood pressure reduction, salt reduction. After all this experience, I have no doubts that our main chronic diseases, our contemporary public health problems, are closely caused by our lifestyles, and that by healthy lifestyles you can dramatically improve both public health and health of individuals. As was also said in the introduction, after all these years, I became in 2001 the director for chronic disease prevention and health promotion at the WHO headquarters in Geneva, and also later on president of World Heart Federation. By that time, the global public health picture had very much changed. There's been big transition. In the old days, in developing countries where most of the people live, it was infectious disease epidemics. Now it's chronic non-communicable diseases. Even in the poor countries, in most countries of the world, heart disease is number one killer now. 2/3 of mortality in the world is due to chronic non-communicable diseases. And heart disease, let me say, every third death in the world is cardiovascular. So contemporary public health is so much dependent on how we can control and particularly prevent these diseases. And with this work as director for chronic disease prevention in WHO, I could much contribute to applying the principles that we had in Finland and North Karelia and transfer them to the WHO strategies that are now available. And I still want to emphasize that especially in the developing world, there are very limited resources for expensive curative work like bypass surgery or cancer care. But our message is that with simple lifestyle changes, with health promotion and policies, you can dramatically improve the health of your nation. I could also add that this message of lifestyle is universal, but the role of different lifestyles vary somewhat between cultures and with time. Our particular situation in North Karelia and Finland was especially very wrong quality of the diet, high animal fat, low vegetables, high salt. At that time, we had relatively little obesity because the people, many of the men were lumberjack farmers. They had very strong, very heavy physical work and no obesity. Now, over the years, of course, we also see the obesity problem and pay much more attention also to weight control through dietary habits and physical activity. And finally, let me say that it has been a privilege to be part of this global public health work. And we were, although the situation in North Karelia was very unhappy, in a way that gave us the historical start to attack the problem. So we were among the first to start to do work and get experiences how to control this epidemic. And later on, as was told, we could expand it to all Finland. And then it has been a privilege to be part and contribute to the start of global work for prevention and control of chronic diseases that the World Health Organization is leading and was started after year 2000. Excuse me. And this, as the introduction told, part of my work was to coordinate and lead the work for the WHO Global Strategy on Diet and Physical Activity, which was really a cookbook for all nations for the main principles, how to influence diets and physical activity. At the same time, the countries of the world had also agreed on the International Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, FCTC, which is, by the way, the first and the only actually internationally, legally binding treaty in the field of public health, which something like 180 countries have ratified. I'm sorry to say USA has not ratified that, although there's a lot of tobacco control work going there. But so this was the work in WHO, which I felt was very, very important, because that is the UN organization in the health field for countries. Back to the history, some people say that controlling infectious diseases before World War II and maybe even in the developing world after World War II through hygiene, vaccine, and antibiotics has been the first public health revolution. But after the infectious diseases, our public health is dominated so much by chronic diseases. And with the kind of work that I'm describing and that is now going on in most parts of the world, we start to see a progress in preventing and controlling these chronic diseases. And many people say that this is the second public health revolution of the world, because now with the second public health revolution, it's not a question of bacteria or viruses, it's a question of lifestyle. Some parts of our lifestyle has gone wrong, not in the way that nature has meant for us. Also we must remember that it is really a few chronic diseases that are of overwhelming importance to our health and public health. And so that's the keys to our health is prevention and changing lifestyle. Changing lifestyles and following healthy lifestyles is medicine, both for individuals and populations. And I probably said it already, it's not only prevention, it's good, positive health. I usually end my talks by saying that for success, you need particularly two things. You need to do the right things, but you also need to do enough of that. I see many strategies that say the right things, but not much is happening among the population. We must also remember, as the old Director General of World Health Organization once told me, and I keep this in mind, that if there is no trouble, there is no progress. And finally, I want also to say how important international collaboration is. I have been happy to tell about our experiences in tens and tens of countries, but I have always learned a lot of international comparison. And I have really enjoyed working with so many great American figures, and I've been privileged to know Ansel Keys, Nathan Pritikin, epidemiologists, famous old epidemiologists like Jerry Stamler, Henry Blackburn, Lester Breslov, communication scientist Nathan McCabe from Stanford, and Ev Rogers, the father of innovation, diffusion theory. And of course, I must mention my good friend Dan Buckner from the Blue Zones. So this is the story in short, and I shall be happy to answer your questions if I'm able.
What were some of the people's greatest resistance to changing?
There was so much resistance because, as I said, for individuals, changing lifestyles is not easy. Stopping smoking is not easy. Changing diets that you have followed for years is not easy. But it's possible to make changes. With the American professor Alfred McAllister, we developed the steps of change, where information is the first part, but it's only the first part. And so many health programs think that just giving information helps. No, that's only the first step. The second step is telling people, giving people practical skills how to make these changes. So in North Korea, we very soon changed from you should smoke to how to stop smoking, or just not saying that you should reduce salt, but how do you reduce salt, and with what kind of food items? And that's the second step. The third step is persuasion. How can you persuade people? And there are a lot of scientific principles for persuasion. And then the next step is social support. If you change and your family doesn't change or your friends don't change, it's difficult. And then the next step is environmental support. I mean, if the food that you get in restaurants don't follow this, and so it's difficult. And finally, it goes to community organizations that I emphasized. So these steps of change are mainly for individuals, for community, for populations. You need this kind of health promotion, but you need also policy changes. WHO has a phrase that I like to use. We need policies that make the healthy choice the easy one. It's not nanny state. People are free to choose, but the healthy choice should be the easy one.
That's true. We all need to learn that one.
Yeah. You know, one of your efforts, Dr. Puska, was when you, at least we read about it, dairies to berries. And one of our members has seen evidence of what you did with that even more recently, and that's Carl. And so I'm going to put up Carl's, a PowerPoint for Carl. And if Carl, can you unmute yourself so you can tell about the dairies to berries and what you basically have seen happen in Finland even today?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. Well, first slide shows. If you'd go back to the animals, please. Yes, there we are. The first slide shows a couple of prominent players in the North Karelia project, and look what they're eating: a plant-based diet. What is also the case is that they were totally unaware of the changes that they and their herd mates would be facing over the next quarter century. If I could have the next slide, please. Look at the changes here. The number of dairy farms in Finland from 2008 to 2018. And please note that that's only a part of the length of time Dr. Puska's colleagues were busy in the field promoting the changes that have resulted in a reduction of nearly from 12,682 dairy farms, working dairy farms, to 6,738 in that stretch of time, 2008 to 2018. What is not included in this particular graphic is the number of people still alive who would otherwise probably have been very ill or very dead had they continued to eat as they were eating historically in the North Karelia region of Finland. The next slide, if you would, please. So here's one of the changes or evidence of the changes. One of the slogans, I guess, of the program became "Dairies to Berries," and here is what happened to the, in part at least, to the dairy farm that was run by a distant cousin of mine in Finland. With the herd gone, there had to be some productive use of the land, and that turned out to be growing berries of various kinds. Other members of that family turned their farms into sources of material for the forest products industry. So fortunately, the people displaced by these changes, and I hesitate to use the word displaced, but I don't know a better one, because there is too much of a connotation with the word displaced that this was a harmful change. It was by no means a harmful change. It was a revolutionary change that has promoted the general health of people in this region, in this country, to an enormous degree. Another slide, please. Now, the family farm is no longer in the family. The mother and wife is dead, and the farmer himself is living with one of his daughters, deep in the grip of Alzheimer's disease at this point. But the farmstead was sold to a businessman who promptly erected a second story. It was rather a humble, rustic farmhouse at one point, but added a second story for his three young daughters, so each could have a bedroom of her own. Again, what had been a working dairy farm is now what has become the vacation home of a businessman. The next slide, please. And here is another view. You can see the barn in the background. Yes, peering out of the barn are the headlights of an all-terrain vehicle, rather than curious cows who are wondering who has come to visit them. And one last slide, if you would, please. There, the small building in the foreground is the milk house that was a central part of the farm when it was a working dairy farm. It became a playhouse for the businessman's daughters. And behind it is the granary, which is now a place to store lawn equipment and various yard tools and so forth. So you can see the sort of transformation that occurred at a local level among people whose livelihood was the dairy business when the market collapsed, as it fortunately did with the consequences of better health for the country. And the farm exists in a somewhat reduced state at the moment, but still a productive one. So in closing, let me simply say, Dr. Puska, thank you so very much for your work and for coming to share it with us this morning.
Yes, thank you very much. This was extremely interesting. I'm excited because that brings to me so many memories. First of all, number of farms in Finland, dairy farms, have dramatically reduced. That is not only because of health, but because really in modern life you need bigger farms for the production. But what has happened is that the dairy fat consumption has reduced much, and there are many reasons. One is that because people started to eat less dairy fat, there became an overproduction, and the government changed the subsidies. The old subsidies subsidized the farmers based on the fat content of their milk, but the government policy changed the subsidies so that it is based on the protein of the milk. And I have in my presentation slides showing how the fat content of the cow milk changed. Also, we worked together with a meat factory, and they changed the fat of the pigs by the feeding of the pigs so that it became much more unsaturated fat. Also, in the old days when we started North Carolina project, there was legislation protecting butter, and even in the way of taxation, that was changed. Also, we developed first with the housewives mixture of butter with vegetable oil, and then it became a national law. There's been a dramatic reduction in use of butter in Finland. I don't have the figures here, but from something like 15 grams or kilos per year per capita to something like 3 kilos. Of course, in the beginning, as I said, the dairy industry was very much lobbying against us, but they saw that this is the future, and actually they are very much modifying their production as much as possible. But concerning vegetable oil, that was also a problem for us because most of the vegetable oil, like sunflower oil and so on, was imported. But fortunately, the Finnish biologists were able to develop a type of rape that could be grown in Finland. And now the most popular fat oil is so-called rapeseed oil, which I think in USA you call canola oil. So this and many other examples show that how also agricultural policy has been very important. It is important for what we eat. And also, I'm happy that you mentioned the berries, because we also realized that when we initially told people that you should eat more fruit, that was imported. They say, well, that's imported. But then we realized that we can develop the berries, both farm berries and the berries from the forest, and develop this berry project. And now that has expanded a lot. And you go to any Finnish grocery, you see a lot of berry products there. And it was also kind of structural intervention because, as you said, many dairy farmers could switch over to berry farming, which was good from health point of view. And many of them even like that because dairy farming is a heavy work. So thanks for this introduction that reminded me of so many things.
Thank you.
Dr. Puska, we have someone with us today, Mrs. Pirio Lawler. Do you see, can you unmute yourself so that you could speak to Dr. Puska and tell him where you're from? Emma's not there with you?
Jan is.
Jan?
Yeah, I'm trying to admit her right now. She's
Oh, good. Good job. Super. Yeah, I want you to meet Mrs. Lawler. She's a pillar in our community, and she's got a connection to Finland as well. Jan, can you unmute your mother-in-law? I don't think she's there. No. Oh, here comes Emma. Emma, can you unmute her for us? There. There, can you say hello?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I can say hello. Hyvää päivää. Hyvää päivää. Minä olen Karjalasta. I am from Viipuri.
Okay.
Yes, and I am 88 years old, and I grew up in Finland, just after I finished my college. So I came to America. So, but I am, I know that being from Karjala, I have the very typical high cholesterol, and I have to be in a diet. And I think I try my best, but getting the cholesterol down is extremely difficult, very difficult. And so, but here I am, I'm 88 years old, and I still teach. I'm a ballet teacher, and I still teach. So somehow I have been lucky. So, but, and I eat fruit and vegetables, and but, of course, lots of fish also. So, but I still have a high cholesterol. So that's the way it is. So anyhow, I enjoyed your speech, and I left to America from Turku, and that's where I went to school. I got my schooling, Turku. Yes. So it's very interesting. I would like to know a little bit more about your diet. How could you change the Finnish men to diet? Because to me, they are just very, very stubborn men, so, but maybe that's has been successful in your case.
Okay, thank you. Nice to hear from you. You look very healthy, and nice to hear your background from Karelia.
Yes.
To our American listeners, we must say that Karelia is actually geographically a very big area, and the border between Finland and Russia or Soviet Union has changed over the years. So part of Karelia is in Russia, part is in Finland. In Finland, we have the so-called North Karelia and South Karelia, but on the Russian side, we have the Viipuri area, and then it's even a Republic of Karelia, which one of the autonomous areas in Russia. I can mention also that during the communist time, the border was closed. But after the collapse of Soviet Union, they started to take contact to us from the Russian side of Karelia and saying, we have so much heart disease, and can you help us? So we actually started a mini North Karelia project with the Russians in the Russian Karelia. But I must say that until the last few years, there's been enormous health divide between the Russian Karelia or Russia and Finland. The divide in that border is much bigger than the divide between USA and Mexico. It was huge. So it's been very interesting to work also there. You asked a $100 question or $1,000 question, how to change men's diet. That is not easy, because in North Karelia particularly, the men, farmers, lumberjacks, they say we cannot eat vegetables. Vegetables are for animals, for rabbits, not for real men. And so it wasn't easy, but of course, gradually more and more men started to believe our message. And particularly important, as I said, were housewives, because at least in the Finnish culture still, housewives do much of the shopping, they do much of the cooking. And so gradually they persuaded their men for change. And not only persuaded, but they cooked more healthier. And I remember many stories when the men said that they want to drink full-fat milk. And the housewives followed our orders. They preferred the low-fat or even non-fat milk. And in the beginning, they had to pour the milk into some kind of containers and mix it so that it had less less fat, and they didn't tell their husbands that they were actually drinking milk with less fat. So there were all kind of tricks. And of course, eventually, when we had more and more changes in the environment, in the groceries, and also another important thing is that more and more people work in a bigger work sites, and work site lunch programs have been very important, because you go to any work site canteen, you see a big salad table which belongs to your portion. You don't have to pay separately for the salad bar, and so that has been extremely important also.
Kathy, just FYI, our chat is disabled.
Oh, really? Well, that
Yeah.
doesn't help. Well, did you have a question, Valerie, while we've got you on here?
Well, I don't know if this is kind of a broad question, but my stepson, he's the one that got me into plant-based eating, and now he has totally flipped, and he's a carnivore, and he says cholesterol does not matter. His cholesterol is over 300, and I'm terrified that he's gonna die of a heart attack. I mean, he looks great because he's a bodybuilder, but on the inside, he's not so great. And I don't really know how to combat that, because he's a lot smarter than I am. And, you know, he's done a lot of research, and he's following all these people that say cholesterol don't matter.
Okay, thanks for this question. I've heard it so many times, and well, first of all, we must remember that cholesterol is not the only thing. It is question of blood pressure, and it is question of many other things, fiber, and so on. But there's been enormous international research over the years showing that the background of coronary artery disease is let's say, the cholesterol fat in the walls of the arteries. And so it is important, and there are numerous studies showing that people who have higher cholesterol, on an average, they have more heart disease. Or on the other hand, if you reduce your blood cholesterol, that group of people in trials, they have then later less heart disease. But there are so many other things that matter, even in your diet, many other things. And of course, we must remember also genetics. People are different. Even if two people eat the same kind of diet, their blood pressure levels, cholesterol levels, even body weight differs. But everybody can influence their cholesterol, disregarding what the starting level is. And let me just remind you that this 80% reduction in heart disease mortality in Finland has to be due to environmental things, because the genetic base of the population doesn't change in 20, 30 years. So there are many other reasons as well. Yes, and you can be healthy even if you stay healthy, if you have high cholesterol and no other risk factor, particularly if you have no other risk factors.
Dr. Puska, what do you recommend somebody's cholesterol be? What would be the optimal that you would like for their cholesterol to be down to?
Well, it's always difficult to give a figure. I think the general recommendation in most parts of the world is that the total cholesterol should be below 200 your scale. Of course, many of you know that there are two kinds of cholesterol. There's a good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. So if you want to be more careful, you have to actually look at the figures of the bad cholesterol. But of course, when we speak of total cholesterol, most of that is usually bad cholesterol, but the good cholesterol, and it's the bad cholesterol that is influenced by the diet. So I think that's my answer. But also question what kind of advice. I think for instance, American Heart Association has very good advice and very good papers.
Dr.
When you-
Puska, we have one person who said that, Lucy, that she did sort of like what you have done, you advised the housewives to do, change that milk slowly so they don't even know what's happened to them. And I remember in Dan Buettner's book where he had the community organizer, he was talking with him, the man, and he had had all those drastic changes in his health. And so Dan asked him, so when did you change your diet? And he said, well, I never did.
Yeah.
And, and obviously he did because his wife did it for him.
Exactly. It's also over the years. I mean, if you go to North Karelia, where the diet, of course, is not 100% healthy, but it is much healthier than it used to be. But it is part of the lifestyle there now. I mean, the younger people don't know that how big the change has been, because the whole kind of lifestyle dietary habits have changed. Even the environments, the shops, groceries, worksite canteens, restaurants, so on. That shows really how important it is. They don't realize that there has been dramatic change.
Mm-hmm. And Laura is saying that she grew up, or she lived in Rhode Island in the early 90s, Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and they had a huge community intervention to decrease heart disease, and they modeled it after your work. Laura, will you unmute yourself and tell him one of the things that you remember specifically? She's one of our outstanding registered dietitians. Can you do that for us, Laura? Unmute yourself. There you go.
Sure, can you hear me?
Dr. Puska, can you hear Laura?
No,
Hello?
I can hear only you.
Yeah, I'm not sure
Can you hear her now? She just said, I'm not sure.
yeah, nobody can hear me?
I can hear you, but he can't. So,
Yeah, now I can hear now.
oh, good.
Okay. Hi, Dr. Puska. Yeah, I worked there as a dietitian in the early 90s, and I was lucky enough to be on the team of an interdisciplinary team that we did outpatient counseling with people who were at high risk for heart disease.
Yeah, we did Carlton. We did Carlton.
I can't remember the doctor's name now. That was.
I mean, Dr. Dick Carlton was the director of Pawtucket project there. I can come back to that later, but continue, please.
I'm sorry. Yes. I think, yes, he was, I never met him, but the physician that was at Memorial Hospital of Rhode Island, who was in charge of our team, there was a physician in charge of the team. He was also an epidemiologist.
Okay.
And I was lucky enough to be on that team with an exercise physiologist and a psychologist. And we worked with a variety of people, from children who had very high cholesterol levels to adults. And it was just really amazing to live there and to see how the restaurants had changed what they were serving, and smoking cessation had happened, and grocery stores had special projects in place. And I just wish we could do that here in Florida. We really need to start something like that here.
Yeah, thank you. I can very quickly mention that actually, after we had started a few years later, 3 major projects were started in USA with NIH money, modeling a little bit our effort. And one was the Pawtucket project in Rhode Island with Professor Dick Carlton as director. The other one was the Stanford 5-City project with Dr. Jack Farquhar. And the third was in the project in Minnesota with Dr. Henry Blackburn. They all implied a bit same principles, but I think their community work was much less than we had. They had some beautiful health education materials and some clinical work, but much less work in the community. Mm-hmm. In Rhode Island, I wonder whether you ever met one of our young sociologists came over there and he was doing most of the work with smoking prevention among pupils at schools. Unto Pallonen. I wonder whether you ever met Unto.
Oh, perhaps. Yes. It was a long time ago.
Yes.
But thank you. Yes, it was a wonderful thing, and it's an honor to meet you today.
Yes. Thank you.
One of our members, Dr. Puska, is asking about exercise, community exercise. We have several walkers and runners in our group that get together and have running meets and stuff. Did you do anything in North Karelia with getting people together to get outside and exercise? Was that part of the program?
Yes, of course, we told people that physical activity is good. I must say that over the years, the importance of physical activity, in addition to diet, has become more and more important. And there are several reasons. One, of course, is that lifestyles are changing. People don't need much physical activity at work, which was the case in North Karelia in the beginning, because the physical activity of most people, particularly men, was extremely high. They were farmers, lumberjack. So from that point of view, they didn't have really physical inactivity. But because lifestyles have changed, physical activity has become more important. The second reason is that in the early years, science was not so clear about all the evidence, all the benefits of physical activity, because the measurement of physical activity was by questionnaires was somewhat difficult. Now we can measure much better, and even with different meters. And so the science is becoming more and more clear that physical activity is extremely important. And it is good for prevention of so many diseases, and not only prevention, but really promotion of health. And so with this and with changes in this public situation in Finland, we are putting much more emphasis on physical activity, all kind of daily physical activity, accumulating physical activity, brisk walking, and so on.
Dr. Lawler, excuse me, that serves Mrs. Lawler, obviously, the ballet that she's been doing even at age 88. So that's proof of it there too. We have a question from Lucy. She was wondering if the coronary disease is still third cause of death in the world for men and women. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. When we started, I think a little bit more than 50% of deaths were cardiovascular. Now it is around 40%. And of course, most of that is coronary heart disease, but also cerebral vascular stroke. But what should be emphasized that it is a question, you have to die of something. And the question is, at what age? And the heart disease deaths have moved to much older population. So that is the aim of our work, to have a longer life. Let's say how they say, more life in years. No, more years in life and more life in years. And I think my good friend, I forgot to mention, Ernst Winder from American Health Foundation, he said that the aim is to die young, but at a late age. It can then be coronary heart disease.
We have another question from
Yes.
your speaking earlier, and she missed what you said about the percentage of fat that the population was consuming. Was it 30 or 40% that they were consuming in fat?
Yes, it was higher, but the biggest problem was that the most of the fat, I think it was over 20% of energy was saturated fat, and far above. And so if you look at the classical PS ratio, the ratio between polyunsaturated and saturated, it was extremely bad. So it was not only the amount of fat, but it was particularly the quality fat, so much animal fat.
Mm-hmm. Perfect, thank you.
To ask Nat. Nat, did you have any questions? Because you've read his information very carefully, and as a community organizer yourself, I thought maybe you might have a question that might help us here in Winter Haven too.
Well, this is an interesting observation. When I was reading the material, I didn't see much on physical health, and I thought that was fascinating because as you know, it appears the veterans after World War II were given some property, and apparently they raised pigs and cows. So I assume that they were getting physical activity. And interestingly, in Buettner's book, talking about Sardinia, they talked about the physical activity of people that were shepherding sheep and various things. And I mention this because it appears that your primary emphasis was on food and not so much on the physical or the stress or alcohol abuse or things of that nature. So I thought that was just interesting that you've gotten spectacular results, and those results are primarily related to food, if that seems accurate.
Yes, thank you. I mentioned that the pattern of lifestyle problems varies between countries. Sardinia is a very healthy area. There's very healthy Mediterranean diet. People move around. In our situation, the overwhelming problem was the bad quality of the diet. At that time, we did have some problems with alcohol, but not much daily drinking. There was some weekend drinking among men. And as I said, they were physically very active because of their work. You could always question whether it was wrong time of physical activity, but still they were very active and had little overweight. Stress is another important question. There were a lot of people, particularly from outside USA, who said that the Karelians must have a lot of stress. They live close to Soviet Union and so on. And one of the big gurus, I forgot to mention, Professor Len Syme from California, who was the kind of grandfather of social support, saying that social support is extremely important. So he came over to me and we went around North Karelia for three days. And after that, Len Syme told me that, Pekka, I came here, I thought that this must be a very isolated place and there's a Russian border, people must have a lot of stress. But when I go to all these farmhouses and to your meetings, people are very happy, they know each other, there's a lot of social support. Pekka, I feel you must have other risk factors.
Well, thank you very much.
Do you see any emphasis or what the weight of the ratio between total cholesterol and HDL cholesterol? Is there a ratio that you feel is optimal?
You go to details, and I think it's partly question of ratio and very much question of the absolute numbers. I think perhaps the best thing is the absolute number of LDL cholesterol, and the international national recommendations seem to go to lower and lower levels of the bad LDL cholesterol. The interesting thing is that on population level, the HDL, the good cholesterol, seems to be some kind of a compensatory mechanism. When Finns had extremely high total cholesterol, extremely high LDL cholesterol, also their good cholesterol was a bit higher because it seems to be some kind of compensatory mechanism. So it looks like the bad thing is really the bad cholesterol.
Could I ask one more question? Did you got some resistance from physicians, as we're doing here? Do you have any strategies for us on how we might engage physicians? And I assume primarily younger ones too, because I understand there's a new specialty called lifestyle medicine, which is very exciting.
Yes, when I mentioned resistance, I mainly mentioned from the cardiologists from Helsinki who were at that time suspicious about the risk factors and is there enough scientific evidence for prevention, and these young guys, they get research money and they don't do proper work, they don't examine their patients well, but this was completely different type of research. It was epidemiological research. But having said that, I must say that the local doctors in North Karelia were very supportive of us. Of course, they saw the problem of heart disease. And one of our strategy was that we had numerous seminars in nice places, weekend seminars with them and also with the nurses, public health nurses. So we knew them well, and I think they were very supportive.
Great, thank you.
I had a question, Dr. Puska. I've enjoyed your talk very much. In our country, we have in a lot of inner cities what we call food deserts, where it's very hard to get fresh fruits and vegetables into bodegas, and mostly processed foods and high-fat foods are there for the population. I was wondering, did you have a big economic impact for the people in North Karelia, and also a logistical impact as far as being able to get more fruits and vegetables into their local markets? And what was the economic impact on the average family? And if there was a significant one, how did you overcome that?
This is a very difficult question about economic impact. I don't think directly. Of course, there are a lot of things we discussed already, switching from dairy farming to berry farming. One thing which we emphasized was that healthy plant-based food is necessarily not expensive. I mean, if you eat meat and so on, or sausages, it's much more expensive than we have in Finnish culture. You know, we have potato, rudibacker, turnips, carrots, and so on, which is not expensive at all. So we emphasized also for poor people that healthy food does not need to be expensive. Of course, the good thing in North Karelia was that even in the towns there, they were not big cities like New York. They were small towns, so most people had access to some kind of small garden farm, which of course we encouraged.
And Dr. Puska, that was a medical doctor that was asking that question, Dr. Inman. We're glad you're here today, Dr. Inman.
Great.
Okay, so we want you to know how much we appreciate your time, and it's later in the evening for you. So is there anything that you'd like to close with as we finish up your talk?
No, I have enjoyed speaking with you and discussing with you, and I have good memories of the conference in Florida, and I enjoy the collaboration with many of my American friends. And I think the final message is what you also have, that healthy lifestyle is medicine, and it is healthy years in life. It's not only prevention, but it is better quality of life.
Great. You know, for everybody that's here, I want you to know he was in Orlando last, I guess it was September, wasn't it?
I think it was October.
Yeah. And he received the very first Ansel Keys Award, which was just amazing because, first of all, Ansel Keys, tell him who Ansel Keys is. Do you mind taking one more minute to tell about that? And how because it's so dramatic that back in the 70s, you knew this. You knew what to do with diet. And a lot of it depended on Ansel Keys, didn't it?
Yes, Ansel was a great man. I think the work that he did, his studies were great. And then he had a summer place or a place in southern Italy, and he wrote also with his wife the book Eat Healthy, Eat the Italian Way. And because there's so much good in the Italian diet, it's not that question of the quality of fat, it's the vegetables and the lifestyle. And of course, in northern Italy it's changed now, it's not so healthy, but in the really classical Mediterranean diet. So Ansel Keys was very important. He also worked with our Professor Martti Karvonen in the Finnish part of the 7-country study. Actually, here in Finland, in the Academy of Finland, we made Ansel Keys an honorary academician in the Academy of Finland.
Yes, it was just very fitting that you received that first award because he had a big impact on the whole world of what is good diet, and look what you've done. You've done it.
Well, I was honored, but some of you may remember that Ansel Keys' daughter was there present, so I was very, very attached. It was fantastic.
Yes, yes. Well, you're definitely a legend, and we just feel very honored to have you here. And we want to thank you again for taking the time late in the day like this. And how about if we all clap for him? Unmute everybody if you can, just a clap.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
All the best to you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
Bye.
so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, all. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Kathy.
Jane.
Kathy, thank you so much.
Good to see
You're
everybody.
great. Bye.
Bye-bye. And those that
Thank you.
Debbie, are you still here, Debbie? Because I wanted to. Can you tell them what you're going to cook when we do the, and that we can cook along with when you do the Zoom to, whoops, that's the wrong one, excuse me. Yeah, let me get back to that one. This is the class on, I don't know why it keeps doing that. Okay. Debbie, can you tell us what's in store for us on the cook along?
Yes, we're going to first prepare a beautiful green salad. And as you know, Bach Tower has a wonderful herb garden, and we're going to be making an herb dressing with fresh herbs. So I'm super excited about that. Next will be a sweet corn custard. Then we're going to have sweet potato and black bean burgers. And then the last thing is going to be longevity stew. Of course, that probably will be the first thing we make because it's a little bit longer to prepare. But I have prepared that longevity stew already, and not once, but twice. So it is super, super great. And I can't wait to share these recipes with everyone.
Thank you so much, Debbie. We're looking forward to it. And Sue, if you'll put that link again to the session, you register through Bach Tower this time. And so that's how you can do it. So I think we've got a few people left. Was there anything else anybody needed to say before we stop? Vicki, can you go ahead and stop the live stream now?